don't know if you're like this with anything, but I also... Oreos, bro. Okay, if I have a cup of milk and Oreos, I don't know if you've ever seen this life hack. Get a fork. Peel back the Oreo. You gotta get legit Oreos, not this like store brand nonsense. No, Oreos. Peel back the top because the real Oreo bags have peel back tops. You can poke the fork into the middle of the Oreo in the cream area, right in the milk. I'm sitting there like, I'll throw on like a sermon on YouTube, and I'm just like, hold a minute, and I like Oreos like kind of soggy.
Oh yeah,
it's gross, but like just about to fall off.
That's exactly how I like them.
And I'll look down and be like, I ate a whole ream already, and it feels like I've only eaten 2. And then I'm like,
all the time,
I could eat another ream.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it with the biscotti.
Yeah. I haven't done this in a long time.
You do like to dunk in the coffee.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I'm using my other cup because I didn't feel like putting my coffee in an actual cup. So unless I want to take the lid off, I can't dunk it. But with Oreos, I like to use like a bamboo skewer because I think that was just what I had on hand. Oh, I could use the fork. I think actually, the first time I did this was like at my mom's house or something. Like I was a teenager, you know. So bring a whole pack of Oreos upstairs, you know, that kind of thing. The fork was too, like the tines on the fork were too like thick, so it just like bust apart the Oreo. So I was like, I need something thinner, something smaller. So bamboo skewer,
and it works.
Wow. But yeah, I'm the same way though. Like I want it to be just about like falling off. Like it's so soggy, it's just about to fall off. That's what I want it. But
sorry, they're so good like that. So good. And then you're like, what am I gonna say to anyone who's watching me that just saw me sit down and like pound a whole ream of Oreos?
See, the key is you just buy a pack. Don't tell anyone you buy it and eat the whole thing. That way there's no evidence. Yeah.
Oh. You know, speaking of evidence, you should guys come out to the apologetics class where we learn evidences for this world, the Bible, Christ, just amazing things.
Yeah.
Foundational to our faith. So, apologetics, it is the reasonable understanding and studying of the natural world, of the resurrection of Christ, of the cosmological constants and all the fun things that we do, and of truth, subjective versus objective truth, all these things we learn over the course of apologetics, foundational rooting to our faith, as well as giving us an ability to share with others. So super pumped, love apologetics.
Yeah.
Like top tier, just cannot get enough of apologetics. So come out tomorrow, Friday, 6 p.m. And then every Friday after that, on the last Friday of the month, 6 p.m., last Friday of every month, have apologetics class. We're going to be talking about truth tomorrow, which is super important for our society nowadays. The difference between objective and subjective truth. So with a world flooding with, we can have subjective truth, we really need to be able to do what the Bible tells us to do. Always be ready to give a defense to anyone who asks for a reason for the hope that's within you. So, or we destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God while taking every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So Bible commands it, so let's do it. Come out to the apologetics class tomorrow, Friday, 6 p.m.
Yeah. And then coming up in just a couple weeks, we have the new sermon series we'll be launching into, which is the 318 sermon series. And I can see Anthony's got on his board some interesting topics coming up. So certainly looking forward to that series. Got topics all the way from forgiveness to marriage and parenting and some other stuff as well. So I think that'll be a really good series.
And if you were here on Sunday, you know what's happening on Saturday. Open house, 260 Mill Street. Check your email. All the info's in there. Call any of the elders if you have any questions. But come out between 10 and 12 p.m. on Saturday to the open house, 260 Mill Street. Check out the potential new building that God has provided for us down in Poughkeepsie.
Yeah.
So, I think that's it.
I think so.
Wow. Just a few announcements today.
Just a few.
So, all right. Well, Sunday. Thoughts. Kind of a little different on Sunday.
Yeah.
Message. And Steve shared a testimony. So, we have been going through this series, gathers, grows, gives, and goes. And just as a precursor, multiple people after the Sunday message, they were like, it felt like you had more to say, but you weren't saying it. And I was like, you're right. So this upcoming week, we're going to have Gives Part 2.
Yeah.
Because I think there's a whole nother side to giving to the Lord, back to the Lord, that I want to kind of unpack from a biblical sense. So this upcoming Sunday, we're going to cover Gives again. And then the following week, Lord willing, we'll go into Goes. But I kind of blended in some different scriptures here, selected scriptures, and Matthew talking about the parable of the talents, and talking about in Romans kind of the areas Christ has called us into in giving. But what are your thoughts? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I think we hear giving, and most people jump immediately to money, which obviously is a part of giving, but that's not really that's not all that we're called to give, and that's also not what giving is in its entirety, as we're talking about giving in the Bible. And I think between you and Steve, it was I think I just rewatched the message again, like 20 minutes ago. But I think the way that you kind of approached it with understanding first what it really means to give when really nothing is ours, but then also seeing Steve and the example that he's had in his own life, and him being able to share that with us, it's there's something refreshing about seeing someone else's life or hearing what they've gone through, and just knowing like, okay, either I'm not alone, or someone else has had some sort of experience like this, but then also to see through that, not only, okay, maybe they went through some struggles in their early years, but to see through that God was faithful always.
Yeah.
And I know that God is faithful, but when I look back and I see that God is faithful, it's there's a difference between me just saying, yeah, God is faithful and I know that, but then to truly see that in my life, there's such a difference there. So to see that in what Steve was able to share with us, I thought is really cool and really important.
Yeah. A life of looking back and seeing God's faithfulness.
Yeah.
I agree. I also, and this is why giving is so important. It's in the moment. It's almost impossible at times, especially times of hardship, to see, oh, look how God's moving.
Yeah.
Look what God's doing in my life. And it's only like Psalm 119 talks about, it's only in looking back. Because it says, God, you are good. God, you do good.
Mm-hmm.
God, I love your word. I love to meditate on your law. I follow your ways. But over the thread of Psalm 119, it also says this, like, I look at your testimonies. I look at what you've done. You've always been faithful to me.
Yeah.
And so we look back to see evidences of God's working in our life that are so hard to see in the present. And I have my own just incredible testimony that I can look back upon and say, look what God did in my life so faithfully throughout my entire walk, bringing me to where I am today. And why that's so important, and why giving is so wrapped up in here, is the foundational understanding God owns it all.
Yeah.
If we start there, and then we end with an understanding that one day, everything I think that I own, everything, because this is what we do, we think we own it all, that's all going to end. It's the age-old saying, you can't have you don't see a hearse pulling a U-Haul.
Yep.
Well, it's so true, because everything that we hold so near and dear, everything that's so valuable to us in a temporal sense, is going to fade away. And Peter says that the heavens and the earth, they'll melt with fervent heat. So like, what are you keeping? Nothing.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure, and this is what's coming on Sunday, that we're building up treasures, not temporal treasures, but eternal treasures, that moth and rust aren't going to destroy, that thief can't break in and steal. So we need to get our mind off the temporal, set our mind on the eternal, store up for ourselves treasures in heaven, not treasures on this earth. And then what happens is the peace that passes all understanding starts to guard our heart when we realize Christ owns this.
Yeah.
Christ owns my life. Christ owns my wife. Christ owns my kids. Christ owns my money. Christ owns this church. Christ owns everything. And if he owns it, he's the one in charge.
Yep.
So my job is to just be faithful as a faithful servant of whatever he's given to me. But ultimately, his job is to make sure that that all comes to goodness, that all comes to completeness.
Right.
And the Bible says all things work together for good for those that love God and are called according to his purpose. So my job is to faithfully serve, using what God has given to me to do that. God's job is to make sure it all comes out and washes out in the end and is good. And takes all the worry away.
Mm-hmm.
It's God's stuff. It's God's people. It's God's money. I faithfully serve as a servant. God takes care of the details.
Yeah.
That's the only way to have peace
Mm-hmm.
and live in this life.
Yeah. I think
Trusting in him.
Yeah, I think as we've been for the past several years, looking towards a new building for Living Water Church. I think we can really see this, but also again looking back on how Living Water Church started and how God was faithful in that. It wasn't, it was God was faithful to provide finances, to provide a building, to provide everything, and so we see that God's the one in charge. And so we can be more than confident that he's going to provide whatever we need to do what he has called us to do. And so what do we do then? Well, faithfully serve.
Mm-hmm.
And God is going to draw whatever is needed
That's right.
to make that happen. If we are walking out in his will, if we are faithfully serving God as we are called to do. And so I think we see that so clearly. God provided us this building. And, that's where we are. And he's given us that, so we're going to faithfully serve him here. And now
he's always provided for us
He's
here.
always provided.
Always.
Yeah. I know this is, being at Living Water Church for something like 5 years now, this is something I've always heard that, we've always paid every single bill, never had a late bill, like nothing. Like, that's incredible when you think about it. That really is. And, not to say that if that wasn't the case, that God wasn't faithful, but, look at the starting of this church and how it started with, just Derek and his family, and then, a couple of people meeting, and to see the growth that has been brought here, and how God has been faithful to meet all those needs as, you come into a space like this, and it does cost money. And when you don't have a lot of people, how does that get paid for? But yet God is the one who is in charge of all things. And if God is going to do something,
exactly,
man, I don't want to be the one trying to stop him, It's not going to happen. You can't stop God from doing something. He's going to make it happen. So it's just, again, looking back and seeing the faithfulness, it's a good reminder of, that God is in charge of all things. And so we need to be faithful to do what he's called us to do now, and trust that he can work out the details. That even when, I can't see it, that God is capable of seeing it, and that he is capable of handling it too.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been here at the church long enough to tell you with utter certainty, there were times where, it didn't look like, if we looked into the future, it didn't look like there was a way that this was going to continue to work, that the bills were going to get paid, that the ministry was going to keep happening, that, even in trusting God as maybe he called somebody and they moved down south, or they moved away, or, some we would consider like a core person in the church, God called them someplace else, and we're like, man, what's going to happen now?
Mm-hmm.
We can start falling back into that sequence of events. God, are you really here? Are you really working? Now, what he's done in our lives is build up 12 years here of saying, I've been faithful. I've been good. I have this ministry right in the palm of my hand. You keep being faithful, serving out the ministry. I have it.
Yeah.
I'm going to provide. And it's so cool because when we start to realize that, there are fears that come with moving. Mm-hmm. We're creatures of habit. We like the same thing all the time. We can look around at areas, we can look around at what God has given to us around us and say like, well, that's not super comfortable for me. But imagine being Abraham in the Old Testament. He's comfortable, probably with a crazy wealthy family, most likely, and he's lived in the same place his parents and their parents probably have lived, and he's comfortable. He's set, right? And God says, Abraham, or Abram at that point, Abram, I'm calling you to this foreign land. I'm calling you out of where you are into what I'm calling you into. Now, you're going to take your family unit and your possessions here, and you're just going to walk out into the wilderness.
Yep.
And Isaiah said, God's going to make new streams. God's going to make streams in the desert places. He's going to, his will is going to be done in the course of this. And Abraham, he could have just been like, no, this is comfortable for me. This is good. I have everything I want. I have everything I need. My family's safe and secure, and I have my little, structured unit here. And God's like, no, go where I'm calling you to do, and I will make you the father of many nations.
Yeah.
I will make your descendants more numerous than the sands of the seashore. And because of that one man's faithfulness and going where it was uncomfortable, going where God called him to, look what God did. God blessed him so mightily. And really, Abraham didn't get the return on that investment in this life. Like, his descendants were not more numerous than the sand of the seashores while Abraham was alive. He gets to witness that and realize that in heaven of what God did through him. So we have to remember that too. There's going to be times God calls us to do things that are just so outside of our comfort zone. But life happens on the edge of our comfort zone. Life happens when God is using us where we say, my power is not sufficient to do this. This is uncomfortable. This doesn't feel good for me. And God would say, my power is made perfect in your weakness.
Right.
So he calls you to serve, you serve, and trust that he's going to equip you to serve.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm flipping back to...
No, it's okay. I was thinking of a verse
Genesis
here.
now. Something that...
You look in Genesis, and I'm going to read a verse in Deuteronomy that I just remembered, but this is Deuteronomy 8:18, and this is God saying, actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. In verse 17, it says, beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hands have gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he who gives you the power to get wealth, that he might confirm his covenant that he swore by your fathers, as it is this day. And if you forget the Lord your God, and go after other gods, and even serve them and worship them, I solemnly warn you that today you shall surely perish. Like the nations that the Lord makes to perish before you, so you shall perish, because you would not obey the voice of the Lord your God. So, anything we think we have, we can turn into an idol. That's what is being warned and cautioned here. But it's all the Lord's, and we remember the Lord gave us the power to do that. So even in our jobs, we think like, oh man, look at me, I have this job, I've built this career, I'm making this money for my family. Like, God did that. Yeah. He gave you that job, he sustained you in that job, he's the one that allows you to create wealth, if that's the case. When I serve out in a different area, like, you run the tech department here at the church, it's God gave you the abilities to do mentally, because that's what tech really is. So, mental backflips oftentimes. God gave you the ability, especially with our soundboard, God gave you the ability mentally to carry out the line of service he's called you into. Yeah. If he didn't give you that mental acuity, there's no way you could do that service he's called you into. So he gave you the ability, he equipped you to do what he called you to do. Yeah. But it's all him. And it needs to be done for him because he's the one that gifted you with the ability to do it. So I serve that back onto him. Yeah. He gave it to me, I give it back to him. That's why we give, because he owns it all.
Yeah. And we looked at, that the parable of the talents and seeing, okay, that I am called to whatever God gives me, that's what I should be using. And so how does that relate to us? And, what's funny is when I read this when I was younger, the parable of the talents, I always thought like, this is probably like the first time I read it, not realizing what happened at the conclusion of the parable. Yep. But I read it and I'm like, yeah, like, he wanted to keep it safe. So he went and hid it. Like, that's a good thing. And then you get to the end of it and you're like, oh, that wasn't a good thing. And so, I was much younger when I read this, but still, like, the mindset is, if God has gifted me with something, why would I just want to be like, oh, I'm just gonna keep this for myself? And even, look at this in light of, the greatest thing God has given to me, which is life in Christ. Would I just want to like keep this to myself? No. Why would I want to do that? This is literally the greatest thing that anyone could ever have. Why would I want to keep this to myself? I want to share it with everyone. And so the thing that God has gifted me with, I want to use that. And we're all gifted in different and unique ways. And so I could go and have, a ministry, perhaps like you used to have. You had a mechanic shop. But am I good at working on cars? Well, I've got two hands, but I'm not real handy. So, no. So I could do that, but, why would I not serve in the way that God has created me to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And so, if you're good at working on cars and you're serving God in that, great. I'm going to let you do that. Instead, I'm going to take what God has given to me and I'm going to use that for Him. And so, I think we see, different aspects of this. So I can serve God inside the church, obviously, but also outside of it. And we're talking Living Water Church here, outside of Living Water Church. So the very job that I have, that's where God has called me, right? If I am in a job right now, then that's the mission field that God has called me to. Now, do I have other unique gifts and talents? Yes. And maybe that's something within my job that I use and I can proclaim the goodness of God through that. Or maybe that's something, like I get to lead the tech team here at the church because that is the way that God has built me up and He has given me the understanding and the knowledge to be able to work that and that stuff. But the whole point is, what has God given me and how am I using that in a way that is glorifying Him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we can hold back sometimes because it might not feel safe. And that might be our service, that might be our finances, that might be our family. And I don't know, there's just this incredible story that from the first time I heard it, I can't seem to get it out of my head. And it's a missionary who was he was a missionary down in the jungles of South America. And so he's down there and he's trying to reach these like jungle communities, like really just don't have the gospel. They've never heard the gospel, they've not received the gospel, but some of those jungle communities are just incredibly hostile towards outsiders. And even more so, they're hostile towards Christianity because they are serving pagan gods. They're serving foreign gods. And so they're hostile towards outsiders. They're hostile towards Christianity. So what's happened is this guy goes and he's a missionary, and some of these jungle communities start to get converted. And the whole community starts to be followers of Jesus. But because of that, as these other communities, micro communities, realize that, they're like actively hunting these individuals to kill them with the intent to kill them, just literally because they follow Jesus and they follow the message of this missionary. Well, the government finally steps in and starts to get involved because there's like a chaos going on, and they end up arresting this guy, and they put him in prison. And meanwhile, his son has been doing missionary work with him, and his son starts to then ferry food from some of the local villages into these remote places because they can't exit to go get food under fear of death. So he starts to ferry food back and forth. And the missionary's talking to some people in America about, he's in prison and his son's still out doing this. And, he's telling the people, the missionaries telling the people in America, if they catch him, they will kill him. And what's safe here at this point is to say, I need to protect my son. Like, get a hold of him, tell him to stop serving. Like, that's my son, and I need to protect him. But instead, he says to the people he's talking to in America, he says, why has the Lord blessed me with such a child, with such tremendous faith, that he should be worthy to maybe die for the kingdom? That the child God gave to him had such faith that he was willing to die for the kingdom and for the kingdom growth. And that stuck with me because that mindset is the mindset we have to be in. Even my kids they're gifts of God to be used for kingdom growth. And to have the heart that this missionary had for his family to say, why am I worthy to have a son like this? So this is not the first time I've talked about this story, and I can't help being emotional about it, but it's powerful to say, how many of us, including myself, would say, oh, that's my son, I got to protect him, draw him back in. But this missionary realizes it's all about the kingdom. And what a privilege to have a child that would serve the kingdom in such a manner. So he really understood God even owns his kids.
Yeah.
And I see that, and I want to have that heart.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to have that heart for kingdom ministry.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I think, so we looked at, actually, I don't even know if you touched on it at all, but 2 Corinthians chapter 9, talking about the cheerful giver. Actually, I don't know if you read it all. I think you mentioned it.
Yeah.
You said God wants a cheerful giver, and I think that was all you got to. But that is exactly how we are called to serve. And so, okay, looking at, I don't remember if it was not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before when you talked about a bondservant. Well, this is literally how we are called to serve Christ. We have been made no longer a slave of sin, a slave of righteousness. I have made myself a bondservant to God. And if God is my master, well, I'm going to do whatever he tells me to do. Mm-hmm. That's it. Like, that's what you do as a slave, as you are handing yourself over to a master. You're saying, I will do whatever you tell me to do. So, God, I'm going to serve you however you have called me to. If that's, you call me to Africa, God, I'm going to Africa. If you call me to give up all my possessions, I'll give up all my possessions.
Yeah.
But I think the mode that too many of us fall into is we give when it's convenient for us and not giving in the way that God has called us to. And that is, we don't give out of compulsion. Mm-hmm. We don't give because, we feel like we have to. We give because we want to, right? God brings us in, and the whole idea of making yourself a bondservant is you have seen that the master is good and you want to be their servant. You want to serve them. That's exactly how it should be for us.
Yeah.
And so even like that missionary, to have that heart to say, man, what have I done to be blessed with a child who might be worthy to die for the kingdom? That's the heart that we have to have. That, God, you have given me everything. There is nothing that I shouldn't be willing to give up for you. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that I shouldn't use to glorify you, to serve you with, because it's all yours.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of, oh, well, I'm not going to be able to, to make this, buy this thing, so now I'm going to stop giving what God has called me to give. No, we don't just stop when it becomes inconvenient. And I think money is the easy thing to target there, but really it's, my time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We went over this with H2O a couple weeks ago. Okay. What's the easiest commitment to give up? Well, it's that small commitment you make. Mm-hmm. What kind of a commitment do we ask for people to come on a Sunday? 2 hours maybe? So, something else comes up, and what's the first commitment that's going to go? It's that really small commitment. You're not going to, something comes up in your week. How many people are saying, oh, I'm not going to go to work because I have to go do this thing at church?
Yeah.
Very few people. Yet we'll do it the other way around. Oh, I can't go to, church on Sunday because I have to go and, do some extra stuff at work.
But your job is to serve the kingdom, but we make it so we make it so it's flipped around.
Exactly.
The job should be the avenue to do kingdom ministry and kingdom-focused ministry and proclaim the excellences of him who called us from darkness into his marvelous light.
Yeah.
But we flip it around, and we're going to try to subpar the kingdom into our life.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
Mm-hmm. But that's the heart we have. A cheerful giver. I'm doing this because I genuinely want to, because I love God, because I want to serve him, because I understand everything is his. So it's not even like I'm giving. I'm just giving it back to God because he's already given it to me. So, and that's not the mindset that many people have, but that's the mindset and the heart that we have to have when we talk about giving. And again, money is usually the main thing there, but it's not just money. It's our time. It's our talents. It's everything. Mm-hmm. There is nothing that God hasn't given to us. So how do we serve him?
When Jesus called the disciples, we just overlook this because we're like, oh, these poor, wretched, like some of them may have been wealthy.
Yeah.
For most likely, when you really study the history of like the area of the times, we're like, oh, fishermen. Like some of these probably were wealthy fishermen, most likely. Like, or Matthew, Levi. Like, the guy's probably fabulously wealthy. Mm-hmm. And Jesus says, follow me.
Yeah.
And what is he asking at this point in time? He's like, give up everything. Your money.
Yeah.
Give up all of your time. Give up all of your talents. Give up everything you've built for yourself and follow me.
Yeah.
And this is no small like feat that he's asking them to do. Give up all that you are in the service of the kingdom. And I'm not saying I'm not saying everyone should go quit their job.
Yeah.
God uses those jobs as an avenue for his kingdom growth, for your own personal finances to sustain your life. And those are good things. Job is a good thing. Don't quit your job.
Yep.
But your job is secondary to the mission of this world, which is to grow in grace and knowledge and to spread his kingdom, to make disciples of all nations. The job needs to fit into your time, right? We all love to do this. Like, well, I need to have my own personal time. Like, can you imagine Jesus walking around on earth knowing full well in 3 years he's going to go to the cross? The only personal time he took was to pray, to be with the Father. We think of personal time like, I got to have 3 hours a day minimum video games. Like, our personal time is for us exclusively. Jesus didn't take personal time that we read about in any of the Gospels. He served all day, and into the night, he goes up on the mountain to pray. He walks out. He's ministering to his disciples, on the water. They go to the other side, and bam, right away, he's back into ministry. And we see that over and over and over and over. He's feeding the multitudes, and then he gets on a boat, and he's going across ministering to his disciples on the way, and the crowd's running around to find him on the other side. Like, they won't leave him alone. And his entire life consisted of ministry, and it was a short life, and it was ending in death.
Yeah.
And he said, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to do the will of my Father who sent me. So if we're going to be Christians, if we're going to be Christ followers, we should model our lives after that. We are here with great purpose. We are not here for me. I'm not here for Anthony. I'm here for Christ. What do you want me to do?
Yeah.
What do you want me to give? I'll give it.
Yeah.
Sometimes reluctantly. Let's be honest. There's things Christ has asked me to give up that I have struggled with until I was able to give them up.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I'm glad I did, looking back.
It's always hard to see it in the moment, like, how this is something that I like to do. This is something that seems good to me, but we have to trust that God is faithful to show me, no, this is not good for you. And then when we look back, we can see how God, you were right, God. Go figure, you were right. But it is hard to see in that moment, or to see, God, how is this going to work out? It can be so hard because obviously we can't see the future, but I know someone who does. I know someone who knows everything, and so I can trust him. I can't trust necessarily what I can predict about the future, but I can trust that God holds everything.
Yeah.
So as we were talking about Abraham a couple minutes ago, I was trying to find in Genesis where it was talking about Melchizedek, because again, giving, right? So it always like, oh, money, that's like always the big thing. But what I just thought was interesting is when we look at Abraham and it says Melchizedek comes in, Abraham gives him a tenth. Well, when you go and look at it, it's not a tenth of his money. It says Abraham gave him a tenth of everything. And so we're not using Old Testament tithing really as a principle for how we are to tithe. We're not called to tithe in the same way because it's way more than a tenth, but we are called to tithe in the same manner. That is, God, you've given me everything, therefore whatever you ask, it's yours.
Exactly. And that's done well before the law was given to Israel.
Well before.
And he gives him a tenth of everything, and then gives the rest of the way too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into that. We can tie that into Hebrews, but that's a whole nother discussion. But yes, exactly. It's, if that was the Old Testament, we would say like, that's the stepping stone to grace. That's the Old Testament is, they're under the law, they're under the rules and the regulations and the commandments, and they have a priest to access God and all. We stand in grace. And in grace, that verse in 2 Corinthians, we give not reluctantly, not under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work, as it is written, He has distributed freely, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. Like, we need to give to God because the Bible commands us to give to God. Commands, because he owns it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we give back to God, not reluctantly, not under compulsion. And we do that understanding he owns it, but we also do that understanding he's the one who will continue to supply.
Yeah.
So I don't have to worry about giving and thinking of my time or my we can talk about this too, but like my emotional state. It's not always easy to go and be with those that are suffering or those that have pain, or it's easier to be around those people that have joy. And so it's hard to go and like minister to homeless people because there's so much suffering and pain. It's hard to go into the prisons and minister to those that are suffering inside the prisons because your emotional state can be drained from ministering to those kind of people. But we're called in every aspect of our being to give back to God.
Yeah.
And he supplies a renewal, a restoration. As we pour out, he's the one filling us back up again.
Yeah.
So restoring us.
Yeah. If you guys have made it this far, by the way, I don't think there's a biscotti emoji, but leave us the cookie emoji in the comments below.
Cookie emoji. Good job remembering it halfway through.
Thanks.
Well done. Probably not halfway through.
Nope.
I don't know how long we've gone at this point.
Nope. Yeah, so when it comes to giving, it's really, it is everything. Every part of what God has given to us, which is more than just money, more than time, more than, I think those are like the two big things that come to mind, but really it's everything. And so, yeah, emotions, right? The very, I don't even know, those are like such prevalent things, but really it's everything. If God, I don't know, that was a good example you had of, but
this is the thing I always come back to too. Luke 6:30, give to everyone who begs from you, and from the one who takes away your goods, don't demand them back. Because it says, to the one who strikes you on the cheek, offer him the other cheek also. And to the one who takes away your cloak, don't withhold your tunic. So we're talking about, in the giving format, is money is a thing. And that's so big because we just hold it onto it. We hold and think this is ours. But it's also this, like, give forgiveness. Why? Because Christ gave it to me.
Yep.
So I am able to give back forgiveness to others because Christ gave me forgiveness.
Yeah.
We could think this goes hand in hand. Forgiveness, striking on one cheek, let him strike the other. Well, when we don't want to do that, what we're doing is placing ourselves even above what God did. Because God sent his own son to die a humiliating and painful death on a cross so I could be in right relationship with him. And I look at somebody else who's hurt me and I'll say, well, you don't know what they did to me. You don't know what they've done to my life. I need to give forgiveness as I want to receive forgiveness. And that's a good premise in all of the Bible. If you want to receive, you need to give. And that's the Lord's Prayer, right? We forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. So if I want to receive forgiveness, I need to give forgiveness. If I want to receive grace from the Lord, I need to give out grace. And so giving keeps us humble. And that's why Romans 12 says, don't think of yourself more highly than you ought. So in the process of giving, we're able to keep a humble state, understanding the God of the universe humbled himself. I need to humble myself.
Yeah.
So remember the cross at all times.
Yeah, I think I'm thinking of the parable of the man who had, great debt, and the king forgave him the debt, and then he went to his servant who had, much less debt in comparison, and he's like strangling him. And in that passage, Jesus is talking to his disciples about forgiveness, but it's the same thing. This is how God has forgiven us. That there is my transgression against God is way worse than whatever you do to me. Yet he went to the cross for me, and so for me to now proclaim, like, look what God has done for me, and then I come to you and I can't forgive you, I'm taking Christ's name and I'm dragging it through the dirt, because it's, well, now I'm you've done something to me that's worse than what I did to God. And so, but it's the same way with obviously he's talking about forgiveness, but kind of the principle here is the same. Christ forgave me of everything, so I am to forgive others of anything, just as Christ has done for me. I'm modeling what Christ has done. Well, in the same way, Christ came to be a servant. Christ came and gave everything up. He died on the cross. He gave up his life. And so, in the same manner, I'm called to do the same thing. I am to give everything up, right? This life, this temporary life, what does anything in this world really matter? And maybe we're getting a sneak peek into next Sunday, but really, like, that's truly what it is. I'm to model Christ in my life, and in forgiveness, in giving. And how did Christ give? Well, he gave everything. He came to serve those who he was dying for.
Yeah.
And so
not to be served.
Yeah. So we're called to do the same thing. So giving, service, they really go hand in hand, as well as all the other topics that we've hit in this series here: gathering, growing, giving, and then going. These are all so closely tied together. But yeah.
Yeah, they are indeed. That's kind of the point.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like the building format too, and I don't know if you have other things, but in that format, gathers, grows, gives, goes. Really, we're commanded to gather together, so we do that. That's what we talked about. Then we're commanded to grow, and I don't know if I brought good clarity to this on Sunday, but while there's no compulsion, and this is Old Testament principle of like tithing and compulsion, there's no compulsion to tithe in the New Testament, like you see in the Levitical law. It doesn't exist. But to not give, and I mean every aspect of your life, to not give back to the body God called you into, is not doing what Christ called you to do in love. Like, my desire in my life should be, with every fiber of my being, to help you to grow, to be more like Christ. We grow together, right? What am I not willing to give up to cause that to happen? And I mean across the board. We're talking money, obviously. To come and attend this church for any length of time and never give to this church, well, you're not supporting the church. You're also a financial drain. By coming in, right, we have a building, we have lights, we have coffee, we have sound, we have AC, we have heat, all that. Like, you're not just here just to be here. You are also a drain on the church. And, for a season, that's fine, just like with kids. But there's a season of life where you have to say, okay, I need to support this family as well. In service, we need to be serving the body because things need to get done. So we need to be serving the body there. You might be giving up something like, if you guys didn't watch the episode with the drip with Matt Hempel, like, you might even say, is my health top priority over my service? And there's a fine line here to play, but Matt faithfully showed up every single Sunday, and he's probably one of the most immunocompromised people here.
Yeah.
But God called him to fellowship. It would have been super easy for him to sit at home on the couch and watch online. Super easy. But God called him into fellowship, and he trusted God with his health even. God called me to fellowship, I'm going to go to fellowship. If I get sick, I get sick. Yeah. I'm going to trust that God has my best interest at heart. Now, if you're like violently ill and throwing up, like, stay at home, please.
Yep.
For the week or 2 weeks, get healthy again. We want to be good stewards of our health. But I come to church fully knowing I might get sick here. That's part of serving.
Yeah.
That might happen. I come to church fully knowing the people at this church will hurt me. I come to church fully knowing I'm going to hurt other people. That's part of serving. I'm going to forgive, expecting that the body will forgive, right? Because we need to be back and forth. Christ forgave, so I'm going to forgive. And therefore, I'm going to offer forgiveness. Right? So, in all aspects of my life, and I mean across the board, I'm going to come to this church and I'm going to meet people that are in all different stages of life. I'm going to meet people with cancer that will perish from this earth soon to be with God in glory. There's going to be pain associated with that. So I'm placing myself into a body knowing I will experience pain. that's part of service, because we need to serve those people. So we're going to be called as a church into ministries that will be tough to do. Well, we trust in the Lord. He will sustain us. He will provide for us. So if we're going to gather together and we're going to grow together, we have to be giving as a unit, as a body, and giving specifically of what God has given to us, because the body needs everything. So we can go.
Yes.
That's coming
up.
So, coming up. But all of that, as we're going to learn on Sunday, has great purpose behind it.
Yeah.
And just incredible. Like, I shy away from the prosperity gospel because it's such an anathema to the gospel. But on Sunday, I hope to talk of the real prosperity gospel, the realness of the prosperity that Christ does offer to us in truth, not temporally, but eternally. There's great purpose in what his design is for us as a body, and as we minister and fellowship and serve out that body together. So great joy to be here.
Absolutely.
Incredible joy. So I don't know about you, maybe I'm speaking for me, but there's nothing I've ever done in my life that has brought me greater joy than being connected to this body.
Yeah, absolutely nothing. In fact, everything else, right, feels like it just leaves you empty. There's no like fulfillment, but really there's such great fulfillment in serving Christ, like in truly surrendering to Christ and being a willful servant. Like, man, there's joy and there's real fulfillment in it. So yeah, nothing else brings this kind of joy. So. And yes, and it's hard sometimes. There is hardship, right?
Yeah.
Anyone who's in any sort of ministry, people are hard. People are hard to deal with. I mean, it is, right? There are things that are tough, not just people, just, other things you have to deal with. It's tough and it's hard, but our joy comes from Christ.
That's right.
And so that's what it's all about. That's what our service is about. It's about glorifying God. We do it because he loves us. We love him. And so that's what it's all about. It doesn't matter, if, I really don't like dealing with you, Anthony. I'm like, it doesn't matter. I'm serving Christ. And so that's what it's about. But yeah, great joy in that.
Yeah. And my desire, even if the Bible does not command us to like one another, though that is an added bonus, but it does command us to love one another.
Yeah.
So there are people that you might not even like that much. That is irrelevant.
Yeah.
We are commanded to love one another. So my desire should to not think more highly of myself than I ought, and to place everyone around me first.
Yeah.
Their desires before my desires. And living like that is so difficult. Always trying to put the needs of others first. So hard.
Yeah.
But we got to look to Christ. That's what he did. It's how he lived his life.
Exactly.
Trust me, my friend, I am not better than Christ. So my desire is to model out his life.
Yeah.
And trust in him for the power to do so. And the increase that's needed to make it happen.
Yep.
So,
yeah.
So, this upcoming Sunday, people can find it if you'd like to go and look for it. So there's the parable of the talents. But there's another parable, and people like mash them together thinking they're the same parable, but they're not, which is the parable of the Midas. So that's coming Sunday. As well as some of the eternal aspect of giving, temporal and eternal, but focused on the eternal aspect of giving and the purpose Christ has for it and in it. So looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Sunday. Give part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah. Wasn't planning on that.
Yeah.
But God was.
Yeah.
So then go, and then I still have not decided where I'm going to, like the first message. I'm prepping 4 different messages right now for the 318 series. So I'm not sure which one we'll land on first. Hopefully by tonight or tomorrow I'll have that locked in. But we'll see where that leads to. Some really hard topics. Like, you gave me one.
Oh, I got the topics for my 318 group, and I was like, man, these are not only just hard topics, but also like, how do you devote one Sunday to this?
Yeah. Really.
So, which, I mean, maybe you can't, but, really some hard topics, but really interesting, and, I think like just stuff that normally isn't talked about in this setting. So I think it is really good.
Yeah.
Things that aren't usually explored this way. So,
but you can pray for me, please.
Yes, please.
That the Lord would be working and revealing to me truth as we prep these messages, and I seek counsel from His Word and from others. So definitely be praying for me, please.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to always.
Yeah.
What a blessing to be able to do this. So Got anything else?
That's it.
Sweet.
Well, that's not it, but Till
More to
next
come
week.
on Sunday.
Yeah.
Till next week. So we will see you, Lord willing, Friday night for the apologetics class and Saturday for the open house.
Yes.
Pumped about that. And Sunday. Coming together to praise the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Best day of the week. So, but till we see you then, have a marvelous day.
Thanks for joining us.
See ya.